Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Our first story is about a few friends who got revenge on their boss for not paying them for their labor. Join our channel now if you're new here, and here we go. Won't pay us? Fine, we'll pay ourselves. This is a little long, sorry about that, but I've been waiting decades to tell this story. I grew up in a small town in the South. Summer jobs were hard to come by, unless you wanted to drive an hour away to the city. We had a few mechanics, some gas stations, a general store, and a church on every block. There were a lot of farms around that'd hire high school kids, but summers in the South are hot and humid. The holy grail was an indoor job, with air conditioning. The summer before my senior year, I thought that my buddies and I, let's call them Fred and Ben, had landed an awesome job at the general store. The owner, who I'll call D-Face, needed 3 people to unload the trucks and stock shelves in the morning. We had to report to work at 5 a.m., but it was only 3 days a week, and we were done by 10, meaning we had the rest of the day to lay around and fish. Now, there were some red flags that I, being young, did not recognize at the time. The fact that D-Face wrote IOU slips at the end of every week instead of checks was a huge one. He promised to pay us in full at the end of the month. We were kind of PO'd that we wouldn't have any money to spend, but it was an easy job with good hours, so we kept working, looking forward to that sweet paycheck at the end of the month. With it being an under-the-table job, there wasn't too much I could do. The time comes. D-Face tells us at the end of our shift that our paychecks are clipped to our time cards. Ecstatic to finally be paid, we go in, open the envelopes, and see that we've each been given a $50 gift certificate to the store. The strange and growing mixture of confusion and horror is a set of feelings that I will always remember. Fred, Ben, and I approached D-Face behind the cash register and tentatively asked, when are we really going to get paid? He looked at us like we were the dumbest people he'd ever seen. That is your pay, he said. We called BS and demanded real checks. Well, I can't do that. All I can give you is the gift certificate. What happened next is what you'd expect from a couple of PO'd high school rednecks. Obscenities were shouted, some things were thrown, Fred kicked over a candy display. We stormed out of there swearing, and I was just seeing absolute red. The effer had used us for slave labor, took advantage of some high school kids to get free work for a month. It went without saying that we were thirsty for vengeance. Now, this was a long time ago, like pre-internet, pre-Desert Storm long ago, and we lived in a very rural area, so we couldn't just call some Bureau of Labor or go viral on social media or whatever people think of as revenge these days. Hell, we couldn't even really tell our parents because they would have said it was a learning experience or some such thing. There was really no concept of workers' rights or anything like that. Hell, in this particular state, there still isn't to this day. We had to handle this ourselves. From then on, we had nightly meetings on a piece of property owned by Fred's dad. There was one purpose, one subject of discussion: revenge. We went through all the usual options, arson, vandalism, and so on, but in the end, we decided that straight-out theft would be the most reasonable option. We were gypped for a month's work, and for the scales of justice to balance, we needed payment. As I said, this was a long time ago. D-Face had some cameras, but they were poor quality and there were only a few. One out front, one by the register, and one over the beer coolers. There were no cameras in the loading dock or the back room where the beer overstock was stored. We knew this because we'd seen the little monitor display in D-Face's office. There was also an old doorway that was boarded over and sealed with polyurethane in the back of the building, but was otherwise unsecured. In other words, our work was cut out for us. We parked in the woods behind the store and watched it for a few nights to see if D-Face had taken any additional security precautions in light of his deception. He hadn't. The closing cashier just locked the front door at 9 p.m. and left. We met up the next night at about 2 a.m. The town was dead asleep. We piled into Fred's oversized pickup truck, drove to the store, killed the headlights, and pulled up to the loading dock. My heart had been thudding in my chest the whole drive over. But now a sort of steel calm had come over me. I was hyper alert, yet calm as the eye of the storm. Our time had come. The wooden door went down with ease when Ben put his shoulder to it. We slipped into the back room, stationed ourselves in sort of an assembly line by the beer racks, and we unloaded the place. Cases of beer and jugs of wine practically flew out the back into Fred's truck with ruthless efficiency. In the space of less than 20 minutes, we had the back room cleaned out. We cleaned out that effing piece so fast, I don't think he would have had time to even crap his pants if he somehow caught us. We'd have been done and gone. We pulled the defunct door back into place, threw a tarp over our loot, and drove to the same property where we held our vengeance meetings. There was a disused tool shed near the back, behind some pretty thick bush, and that's where we decided to put everything. Unloading and carrying all the stuff took considerably longer than snatching it, even with a wheelbarrow, and the sky was starting to shade pink by the time we had it all squared away. Nevertheless, we were all able to make it to Fred's house before his parents woke up and got suspicious. The next few days were tense. I saw 2 sheriff's deputies parked in front of the store the following day and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. We'd come up with a cover story and rehearsed it multiple times in case we were questioned, and I expected cops to come knocking on my door any second. But they never did. I never even saw a report on the local news. In hindsight, D-Face probably knew it was us, but didn't want to get out that he'd used slave labor in his store. Hell, I bet the only reason he called the cops in the first place was so that he could file a report and write it off on his taxes. In any case, we had hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars worth of beer sitting in the old tool shed. And as young Southern boys, it'd be a bleeding sin to let it go to waste. We started celebrating. Cautiously at first, but it didn't take long for word to get out that there were a couple of guys who could get their hands on beer, and by the end of the summer, we were hosting bonfires on the property that were absolutely packed with high school kids. We even had some offering to buy beer from us, and by the beginning of September, we'd made back any money that we lost out on thanks to D-Face's slavery shenanigans. These gatherings included a fair amount of chicks, and I think it's safe to say I lost my virginity thanks to the stolen beer in the shed. It was the best summer of my life. As for D-Face, I never saw or heard from him again. He sold the store a year later to a guy that seemed much nicer. I got another job working there the following summer for actual paychecks. The beer didn't even run out till the start of senior year. The last I saw of it was chugged by Fred at the end of a football game. This could be a good idea for a movie. And our second story. I think you got the message. This was about 20 years ago, give or take. My uncle lived in a residential neighborhood with many kids. The speed limit was 25 miles per hour on his road. His daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, Coco, let's call her, lived across the street. The granddaughter was around 4 at the time and would randomly wander across the street to see her grandpa and go to his house. Yes, my cousin was not a good mom, the first of many signs being that she let her pre-K age daughter just walk off on her own. Lucky Coco was a good child and only went straight to my uncle's house, or this could be an awful missing child story. Sadly, some people think it's okay to speed in residential neighborhoods, even when there might be children playing. This one crazy speeder in a new decked-out Camaro came flying through the neighborhood every day at around 50 or 60 miles per hour. Drove my uncle crazy. Screaming at him to slow down didn't deter him. Children at play signs didn't deter him. Calling the cops did nothing. Cars parked curbside on this street and kids lived all around here. Anything could happen. A kid could dart out between parked cars into the street chasing a ball that got away. Someone could get hurt very easily. Even worse, well, worse for my family at least, Coco could be walking over to see my uncle and this guy at this speed wouldn't be able to stop in time. So my uncle thought about it for a while on how to get this guy to slow down. My uncle is normally an act now and think about it later type, so I'm impressed he plotted something rather than just throwing a hammer and breaking out the windshield. But my uncle wanted to make sure this guy really got the message that he didn't need to be anywhere so fast that he endangered lives. Endangering lives. Yeah, that's the idea. You see, Uncle had an old covered baby carriage from when Coco was an infant. She used it to play with her dolls. This Camaro guy has a pretty predictable schedule, so my uncle took the carriage with the doll outside and hid in front of his car, parked at the curb where he knew Camaro guy couldn't see him. According to schedule, Camaro guy would be coming in the opposite direction, so he'd be seeing the rear of my uncle's car from his vantage. My uncle was in front. Uncle heard the Camaro coming, waited a moment as he neared, and pushed the carriage into the road. For added dramatic effect, my cousin was nearby and screamed, "The baby! Catch the carriage!" Camaro guy had no time to react and plowed into the carriage, sending the doll flying. Uncle and cousin ran for the doll like it was a baby, freaking out, and looked at the driver. The A-hat didn't stop, but you could tell he freaked. My uncle said he turned pale and turned at the nearest corner, one house down, and off his normal route to get out of there. Well, reason stands that this guy must have figured he didn't kill a baby in a hit and run because that'd be in the news, but we never knew for sure. What we do know is that guy never came through the neighborhood again at any speed. He was spotted a number of times at local public bus stops, waiting on a bus. I was in that area about 5 years ago with my uncle, and he pointed out someone on a bus bench waiting and started laughing, telling me it was Camaro guy, waiting for a bus again. As I said before, this happened around 20 years ago, and we saw him 5 years ago. I guess that scared him out of driving for life. I think you got the message. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.